we have a situation in India where 119 billionaires, multi-billionaires, have more wealth than the total national budget.
Thank you for joining Change I Am Possible, which is India's first Future Tech podcast. Really appreciate and honored to have you. So to my listeners who don't know about you, I'm just going to give you like a brief introduction and we just get into the conversation. So Mr. Guy Stanton is a professor, research associate at SOAS University of London, founding member and honorary co-president of the Basic Income Earth Network, a non-governmental organization that promotes a basic income for all, author of several books related to universal basic income and rentier capitalism, and he's been fronting the universal basic income pilot program here in India. I'm really honored to have you on the show. So COVID, we are all confined and it's at home, and it's had a butterfly effect across academics, economy, society, and culture. Everything is changed. Right now, I mean, the Beirut blast, it has kind of like ignited a silent revolution, because of the inaction of the political leaders. Protesters are coming all out around the world, in Germany, in Belarus. Then the death of George Floyd in America by racist cops showed the deep division and cracks in the American society. There's been a rising religious nationalism in India and around the world. Voice of reason is being oppressed. Where do you think the world is going? And is COVID igniting or fanning this revolution, which is underpinned on inequality?
Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to do this with you. I have worked in India many times over many years, and you mentioned in passing that we conducted a series of pilots of basic income in West Delhi, in Madhya Pradesh, and in tribal areas. I'll come back to that later, the results. To a certain extent, the whole debate on basic income in India was given a legitimation in the budget statement 2 years ago and in the report tabled in Parliament. A whole chapter was devoted on the possibility of a basic income in India. And I think the events since then have given it a greater urgency and practicality that we will come back to in this discussion. What I've been arguing, and by coincidence, a new book of mine came out in March, but it was written last year. I've argued that the economic system in the world had created a very fragile economic system, and that fundamentally we can describe what has been happening as global rentier capitalism. What that means is that more and more of the income is going to people and institutions and corporations that are earning from property. Physical property, financial property, intellectual property, and less is going to the precariat and people relying on labor. That's a global phenomenon. It's not peculiar to India, not peculiar to Britain. It's a global phenomenon. And it's in that context that the economy has generated a very, very fragile situation. And what I've described it as in this new book is that it's created 8 giants. And the idea of a giant was stemmed from a famous report produced in 1942 by William Beveridge, which set the pattern for the post-war welfare states around the world, in which he said there was a time for revolutions, not patching. In other words, fundamental change because the economy was in a mess. And he said that the welfare systems in the post-1942 era should slay 5 giants. And those 5 giants were disease, ignorance, idleness, squalor, and want. Now, my book is saying that the globalization that we've been experiencing, which has done many good things. I don't want to be entirely negative. I think globalization and open economies are desirable, particularly for businessmen. But we have to admit that we have generated, or we've seen the generation of 8 modern giants. And those 8 modern giants are blocking the way to a good society, a sustainable society that can avoid some of the things you mentioned in the introduction. And the 8 giants are first and foremost inequality. And inequality today within India, within other countries, is far more to do with wealth inequality than income inequality, because wealth is accumulated. So we have a situation in India where 119 billionaires, multi-billionaires, have more wealth than the total national budget. That is an unsustainable situation. I'm not saying anything negative about the individuals who have become those billionaires, but they're earning far too much. And I've been invited to speak at Davos 3 years in a row. And many of those billionaires have been in Davos, and they're honest enough to admit that the system is rigged too much in their favor. They have been earning too much, even by their own standards. And I think that that's a very important point. Now, the inequality creates many of the other giants, or intensifies the threat of other giants. And we've got to do something to reduce inequality. We have to do something. If we don't, then those other giants are going to bring down all of us. And what the book says, and I'll come to the other 7 giants in a minute, what the book says is that the 8 giants have created this fragility, and it only would take a spark to send the economic system into a big crash, depression. And the spark has been the pandemic.
Right.
The pandemic itself is not the cause of the economic slump that we're going to experience, but it's the trigger, just like the shooting of the Archduke of Austria in July 1914 was the trigger for the First World War, but not the cause. Now, the second big giant, which I think most people in India understand, but it's the case all over the world, is we have chronic insecurity. People feel insecure. They feel economically insecure, and it's a different type of insecurity from the sort that Beveridge was dealing with. It's fundamentally about uncertainty. Now, any economist can tell you that with uncertainty, there are unknown unknowns, and you can't have an insurance system to protect you against uncertainty. Very important for thinking about basic income. Okay. And this insecurity is contributing to the third giant, which is stress. Millions and millions of people are suffering from stress that leads to rising morbidity. It leads to the suicides. Everybody knows about the suicides among the farming communities of India, but suicides and suicidal tendencies are a pandemic in itself. And we have to realize that whatever reforms we want to favor have to be reducing stress. The fourth giant is debt. And of course, private debt in a country like India is higher than it's ever been. It's astronomical. And you only have to have a small shock when millions and millions of people find they can't service their debts. And they become homeless, they become petty criminals, they become suicidal, all of these things linked up. And if you have a demand shock of this sort that we're experiencing, that indebtedness becomes unsustainable. Okay, and that's a real problem. The fifth giant is what I call precarity. And precarity means that millions and millions of people are losing the rights of citizenship. They don't have social rights. They don't have economic rights. They don't have cultural rights. They're losing those. And if that happens, then people feel more and more like being supplicants. The beggars in the streets that we see every single day in every single Indian city and town, and the same in other countries, and only the tip of the iceberg of this sense of precarity, this loss of being an integrated person in the community. And the sixth giant is something that is on the horizon in India, but is big subject in the United States and Europe, for example, is automation, those robots coming that many people think will make us all redundant or millions more redundant. I believe that automation should be encouraged, but we have to realize that it's contributing to the inequality, the insecurity, and the disruption, and we have to have policies that protect people in that context. The seventh giant, in my book and in my talks, I believe is the most important giant of all, and that in the long term, and that is the threat of extinction. One of the things that we've learned in this pandemic is that if you have a system which erodes the ecosystems, erodes nature, you create conditions in which pandemics spread. You create situations where viruses are transferred from animals, particularly bats and rodents, to human beings. And we're going to see many more of those threats. And a basic income system is a way of helping deal with that threat of extinction, and I'll come to that possibly later. But this seventh giant has made millions of people, particularly young people, educated people across the world, realize that we have to do something to recover the ecology, nature. We have to have a better system for preserving nature. Otherwise, we're all threatened. And that leads to the eighth giant. And the eighth giant is the threat, as you said in your introduction, in effect, the threat of neo-fascist populism, playing on the fears, playing on racial prejudices, playing on xenophobia, playing on the theme that your problem is because of those people over there. It's a shockingly simplistic perspective. It's the one that Donald Trump has played again and again and again, but it is racism by any other name. And of course, we are seeing that not just in the United States, not just in India, but everywhere. We're seeing populists with simplistic messages saying they will bring back a better yesterday, something like that. And they are a major threat. So unless we deal with these eight giants, we are going to have a future that does not look very appealing. And I believe a basic income is a mechanism for weakening those giants. Each of those giants would be weakened if we had a basic income system. And it's not going to be a panacea. I think in the pandemic, there is one lesson that every single one of us should internalize, and that is this: the strength and resilience of all of us as society will depend on the strength and resilience of the weakest groups in our society. If we leave out some major groups, leave them in insecurity, poverty, deprivation, losing rights, we will all suffer the consequences. And I think that is why now across the world, millions of people, literally millions, have suddenly become aware that a basic income would be a good idea. It's affordable. There's no question about that. It is affordable. It wouldn't reduce work. Our pilots show that it increases work, it increases productivity, it increases income, it increases tolerance for others, it increases women's status. The positives can being shown very strongly. Our pilots showed that. But I think now more people, more intelligent people are saying, we've got to do something like this. And that's, I think, where the debate is today.
So beautiful. I mean, these 8 giants, you broke it down, you unpacked it so beautifully. And I guess if, and only if, people kind of understand how profound it is. It's right over there. Like you said, 8 giants. If we deal with this, we will get a better, equitable world for everyone. You pointed out about the inequality, the chronic insecurity, the stress, which has been thrust forward because of COVID, the debt, the precarity, automation which is coming, Industry 4.0, and why everybody is scared when this could be an opportunity for us to get into that beautiful future. The threat of extinction, how we are harming the planet, and how suddenly because of COVID, we've understood the importance of environment. Cars are not on the streets, the birds are chirping, the sky is blue, and only if we take those good points in the last, the neo-fascist populism where the world is going bonkers, and if all of these, and you also said, taking the weak along, if we do that, there is no, I mean, we are onwards towards a better world and a better planet, and I hope the global leaders, I mean, take something from here. And I really wish that, we have people like you as leaders of nations, because there needs to be a change of mindset. You also pointed out in India, we have around 119 billionaires who have more 90% of the entire world. I guess the same thing is happening globally. 1% of the total global population owns 90% of the entire global wealth. Even if they release a fraction of their money, hunger, poverty, illiteracy, I think will vanish. So you broke this down beautifully. There are obviously so many wrongs of the capitalism society. Is UBI the answer? And what is universal basic income? Can you just run my audience?
First of all, I want to say that a basic income is not a communist idea. It's not a right-wing or a left-wing idea. It's an idea about giving people a sense of justice, giving people a sense of basic security, and enhancing freedom. So it's perfectly consistent with a market economy. Okay? Now, basic income be defined as the following. Every individual, man and woman equally, should receive a modest amount each month in cash or equivalent, unconditionally. In other words, they don't have to behave in certain ways. If they break the law, that's another matter. It should be dealt with by the legal system, but not as part of the basic income system. And that it should be equal to everybody. It should be paid to everybody in a community who's a usual resident in that community. I don't use the term universal because for practical political reasons, you would have to say that you couldn't give short-term migrants the basic income. You would have to have it only legal, usual residents in the community, the country, or in the state, depending on where it's administered. And it should be non-withdrawable. In other words, it's your right. You don't have to do certain things or not do certain things. It's your right. And people who say, well, why give to the rich as well as to the poor? Well, an economic right is given to everybody. If you want to make sure that it increases the effect on inequality, reducing inequality, then you can increase the taxation on the wealthy so that they actually end up not gaining anything but not losing anything. For me, it has to be given to everybody as a member of our society. You are an Indian citizen living in India, you should have the basic income. Okay? If you want to tax back, good, because there's need for more progressive taxation, particularly of wealth, but it should be kept separate. I think it's very important. Now, we know that the affordability would depend partly on the level that you provide of that basic income. What I've proposed as a way of imagining it is supposing every man and every woman living as usual residents in India to receive 1,000 rupees each per month. We know that that is not enough to give a decent standard of living. All right? We know that. And every child should get half that. But what we found in Madhya Pradesh and in West Delhi is that even a much smaller amount than that, we gave 300 rupees a month. That was some years ago, so it was worth more than now. But even if you give a smaller amount, it has positive effects. Because in extremis, people know that they've got that coming in. They can take more entrepreneurial risks. They can pool their money in the family. They can pool across with neighbors and use the money to give their sense of insurance against shocks when they hit a community or an accident or an illness to somebody or a collapse of the crops. And we found that it actually liberated people to become more economically active, to do more work, to produce more. And I remember going to one of the villages in Madhya Pradesh, and some women came up to us. They'd obviously been preparing to tell me when I got to the village what they were going to say. And they came up and he said, there's one group in our village who are very unhappy about this scheme. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. And they said, it's the money lenders. And I looked at them and I said, well, we can't make everybody happy. And of course, that tells a truth. Because the money lenders take advantage of the vulnerability of people when they haven't got what is a scarce commodity. The scarce commodity is money. And if you don't have money, and then you suddenly have need for money, you have to go to a money lender who can charge 50%. I mean it, 50% a month. Okay? And they turn that into a Nauka system, into a debt bondage, and the rest is well known across India. One of the beauties of having a basic income scheme is it has strengthened resilience against the money lenders. Well, I think that's a very good thing. And it's the same with the basic income being used for the children's schooling. Wonderful, because it paid for small things like shoes, like buses trips, like books and so on, which gave the schooling a greater appeal, made it more accessible, and particularly for girls. Because girls need to go on the buses, they need to have proper shoes, they need in particular protections that go with little things that enable them to take advantage of school. And we saw a huge increase in school attendance and school performance by girls in particular. And it just came from facilitating a little bit extra. I don't know, you don't know what a particular family needs. In one case, it might be one thing. In another case, it might be another thing. And all these paternalistic schemes, which presume the bureaucrats know what all families need, is a very blunt instrument, because often, actually, what a particular family needs is something very specific. And a basic income makes the choice for that family much easier to make. And it's consistent with encouraging a dynamic, ecologically sustainable, and realistic market economy that is fair, because it provides people with this basic security without which you cannot be a functional human being.
So moneylenders opposition, we'll come to that later. So the ex-US presidential candidate, Andrew Yang, he was a major advocate for UBI, but there was a lot of opposing voice for basic income. But post-COVID, a larger population is seeing the importance of implementing UBI. So, but there is a certain section of critics or voice of opposition who say that people will not have meaning in life as work gives life a meaning. What are your views on that?
Well, I've addressed this in the books, and our pilot addressed it. And I want to say it very, very firmly so that your listeners can get the idea. A basic income increases work, not decreases it. I repeat, basic income increases work, doesn't decrease it. Contrary to prejudice, people want to improve their lives. People want to take advantage of opportunities. If you ask anybody if they had a basic income of 1,000 rupees a month, whether they would stop working, you would find that people would say, no, I would like to improve my life. I want to improve my life. Opinion polls around the world in much wealthier countries than India have consistently found that 95% of people say, no, I would want to continue doing work. But more importantly, basic income, as we found in Madhya Pradesh and West Delhi, leads to people having more energy, more confidence, more opportunity to buy small materials and raw materials and so on to start improving their working life. Pilots have shown that people who have basic security in the form of a basic income have higher productivity when they are working. They're more efficient, they're more confident, they're more cooperative, and it actually also overcomes something that is deeply embedded in the existing welfare systems in OECD countries and in India, which is what we call the poverty trap. The poverty trap arises from the following. If you say we are going to give income support only to the poor and then help target the poor, that means that somebody who makes an effort to become non-poor would automatically lose the benefits that are only for the poor. What this means often is that if you go from poverty and you raise your income from work, you lose benefits. So that's a disincentive to take the work. So that it's called a poverty trap. It says, I have no incentive to take small-scale extra work that would push me above the poverty line. Same with the BPL cards, the APL cards, and all of the systems that you target only the poor. It traps people in dependency and poverty, which is what the opposite of what a basic income does. A basic income says this is your right, regardless of what your work status is. So you still have that right. If you improve your work, you work more and more successfully, you still get that right. And that, I think, is a beautiful feature of a basic income system. As I said earlier, it's not a panacea. It isn't going to solve everything. But what we need today is a realization that to get India and every other country out of this pandemic slump that we're experiencing, we've got to increase aggregate demand. A basic income system paid out to everybody, in effect, would lead to people in small communities, in local communities, being able to spend more on basic goods and services. Basic goods that are produced locally in local towns, in villages, in the countryside, which is precisely what we need, because that is the sort of growth we've got to stimulate, because that's the way that the economic system will be revived. If they spend the money giving help to the banks and helping the stock exchanges recover, the inequalities will increase, the insecurities will increase, and the increase in aggregate demand that is needed will not take place. It will go in luxury imports. It will go into rebuilding savings. It will go into more property being built and owned by the super rich. We have to realize that it's a demand shock. And to recover from a demand shock, you need to stimulate demand at the bottom. And I think that's what a basic income would do.
Yeah, so because of COVID, in India, we have around 120 million plus who is jobless. In America, there's 50 million plus who are jobless. And globally, the numbers are rising, right? Governments are talking about stimulus package, which frankly speaking looks like just a PR gimmick, because most of the money is just going to the banking industry and is just going to those really big companies. It's none of the lower middle class, small, medium enterprise are ever going to see those kind of money. So do you think COVID-19 has like really pushed the need of universal basic income to the fore, and instead of these pilot programs which are happening all around the world in Delhi, Madhya Pradesh, Kenya, and so many other places, will we see a implementation of UBI in a larger scenario? And when do you think something like that's going to happen?
Well, since the pandemic struck earlier this year, every single day I've had media contact me from all over the world. It's incredible. And I've done many presentations. Often I'm asked, where do you think a basic income is going to come into full effect first? We've now got a situation where several African countries, such as Malawi, have introduced something like equivalent to a basic income. We have a number of other countries in Africa actively planning it. Togo, I was talking to the minister recently, and they've introduced a sort of basic income. Korea has a whole province where they're operating a basic income, and it's very, very actively being discussed. A number of other countries have moved to having something close to a basic income. I've always thought that in the Indian context, it should be rolled out with communities. We proposed after our pilots in Madhya Pradesh that effectively tribal areas would be an ideal place for the introduction of a basic income, because they're self-contained, they are vulnerable communities, they're low-income communities. In our pilots, the biggest positive effects occurred in tribal communities. I would love it if one or two of those billionaires, those 119 billionaires that we've discussed, would just put up a few $1 million or equivalent in rupees in putting out pilots on a bigger scale in tribal communities. It would be a wonderful move. It would show how it's implemented. We call this the last mile. How do you deliver it? In India, you have the mobile money now, you have the Aadhaar system, you have the technological capacity to do it, which many other countries don't have. And you have to salute the achievements of those responsible for that. We know there are certain dangers. We know there are dangers to privacy and all the rest of it. But we know that that technology enables us to have the ability to roll it out, to give and to get, but through the corrupt bureaucracy. Every Indian of any knowledge knows that the social policy structures of India in the past 70 years have been deeply corrupted. So several of your prime ministers have said, excuse me, that 90% of the money spent never reaches the poor.
Yep.
We know that. We know why. So let's stop pretending. Let's stop pretending that NREGA works wonderfully or the PDS works wonderfully. They don't. They may in Kerala or somewhere where there's special circumstances, but they don't work and they have huge administrative costs. And we know that the basic income cuts through the bureaucracy. It cuts through the bureaucracy. Sonia Gandhi told us when we were about to start our pilots in Madhya Pradesh, she said, it'll be a waste of money. The people don't have bank accounts. So how can they get the money out? So we went to the villages and we said, look, to start with, you will receive the basic income from people who will come round and deliver it in the villages. In the first 3 months, you have to open a bank account if you want to continue to receive the basic income. From a point where only 6% had bank accounts at the beginning, within 2 months, 96% of those families had opened bank accounts because they had an incentive to do so. And then people are, because they're poor, that doesn't mean they're stupid. They are poor, but they realized that opening a bank account was a way to get the financial security with which they could build their lives. And I think today it's even easier because of the technological advances made since then. And I think that it would be a wonderful thing if, while the politicians are playing politics, as the politicians do in every part of the world, that a businessman or two or three, a community of business people, would put some resources into a scheme to show the politicians that it can be done and must be done. And I think that is the message I hope you can convey to listeners of this and to people discussing basic income in India at the moment.
Right. Yeah, I hope that these big companies who are listening in, who understand that we need everybody to be into the ecosystem. With COVID, there are people who are dying, and if they don't loosen up their purses, there won't be consumers, because the economy runs on production and consumption. If there's nobody there remaining to consume, I mean, what are you going to produce, right? So, yes, India's political system is deeply corrupted, and I wish that there's a change around. I hope that maybe the Industry 4.0 with the automation brings around some kind of a change. You talked about money lenders' opposition, right? So the world is run by a very powerful small group of elites who understand the power of divide and rule. They are the ones who fund the global war machinery and fuel hatred between countries. So arms can be purchased and more money can be made. So these powerful organizations, the banking industry, these traditional lenders, institutions, they stand to get disrupted if UBI is implemented. As a prominent and vocal advocate of UBI, have you experienced any retaliation from them?
Well, I have to say that I've been invited to speak to groups representing big finance, big tech in Silicon Valley, and as I mentioned, Davos and other corporate events. And I think there is not a homogeneous sense of feeling in big finance, in big tech, and so on. Some of those people are so self-centered and so egotistical that they can feel immune to whatever's going on around them. But that's not the majority, I believe. I believe that many of them are coming to accept and state openly that they've been winning too much and that they're getting grossly disproportionate amount of income and wealth and so on, and that they are sensible enough to realize that things must change. And I think that that is the context where we're having this discussion in 2020 with the pandemic in the background, in the foreground, dominating everything we're thinking, that more of those people are saying, look, we believe we should pay higher taxes. We believe we have to have some distribution of the gains, if only opportunistically, because otherwise the whole system is going to become fascistic. It's going to become vicious. There's going to be social violence down the road, more social violence. And I think a lot of them now are openly saying, we must help. We must do our bit. And I think that we've got to the debate where we have to say to those people, put your money where your mouth is. And we, for our part, the technicians, the economists like myself, must also put our backs and hearts into building a better income distribution system, perfectly compatible with making profits, with making good incomes, with producing goods and services that people need, and to do so in a context where we have a trend towards a good society where everybody has basic security. Because if you're a human being and you believe in a good society, then you should want your fellow human beings to have what you want and have what your children want and what you want for your children. And I think that ethos is beginning to gain credibility and acceptance by the winners, the plutocrats, the elites, the people who know they're doing very, very well. Too many of them are still in a mindset where they put up the gates, they keep their servants, they keep their lifestyles, and they dismiss those outside. Too many are doing that, and on shame on them. But I think a lot of people are changing and becoming more altruistic, more tolerant, more compassionate. And the basic income is about compassion. It's about compassion. It's about saying, I want for others what I want for myself. And I think that's a noble human sentiment, whether you're in India, whether you're anywhere else. And I think that that's the normal human condition. And we need to encourage that condition, that sense of values, to be translated into material action. And I think nothing would be better at the moment than a basic income system.
Thank you, Guy, for sparing your time, sharing your insights. And yes, I think the world needs to change. And somehow this natural disaster has brought us to the point where if we do not make the right choices right now, we will end up going into a dystopian world. The choice rests among us. There is some fantastic things happening with this COVID disaster, but there's some fantastic things happening in the world of technology. We were sitting in the cusp of human evolution, and for this equitable future, universal basic income will be, I think, like a big role. And I really hope and I wish that the people who are listening, the governments, the big billionaires out there who understand that this world can only become great if we come together and make this world a better place. And I think universal basic income will play a big role. Thank you for what you're doing for this movement, and really appreciate you giving time, being part of Change and Possible podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.